And then turn the meeting over to Councilman Dean Michael.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I made extra copies if you guys want, of the changes that were made.
Can you read, Trish? Good, how are you?
So the only question is to find out exactly what the name of the permit is, so that
Right.
in that pond permit application, whether it's a pond.
Hold on, you've got to, we had it,
Oh, we're on now?
we're
Yeah.
on, and we've had complaints that they can't hear everybody, so if you could come to the mic.
People actually want to hear me?
Yes, people want to hear everyone.
So if we simply remove the word pond from the intro,
Right.
so larger than 1 acre shall require a permit issued by the zoning administrator. And then in A1, after pond, we add or lake.
Well, we did, what Dean did was to remove pond in letter B. So it simply says the zoning administrator shall issue the permit.
Right, but if you look at
And we could
A1,
do the same thing up top.
Correct,
Right.
that's what I'm saying. And then the permit will be titled either pond permit or lake permit, depending on the size, and we'll need to
Right.
create that document.
did you get that?
But we don't need to name the actual permit here. We can
Correct.
just say a permit.
Just say permit,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Okay. What was,
There was only that one change in there.
what's that on, you're talking about 65?
No, the one you have
Oh,
in your hand,
71, yeah,
71.
71. It was in letter B, right? Filling, grading, and stripping. Oh, this was the only change here?
Mm-hmm.
I thought we had talked about changing something in letter B. General provision. Central excavation, filling, grading, and stripping. Something about grading and stripping we had talked about, no? Does that ring a bell?
No, whatever's on my notes here, I mean, that doesn't
No? Okay,
ring a bell.
all right. Then,
So just fix the version date on the bottom,
yeah, I saw that, yeah.
and then,
Okay. Then we're okay with that.
yep. Alright, so we left off on the ends, I think.
Mobile home,
We
motor
finished
home.
all the motor vehicles and everything else.
Right.
There was a couple of things that I think, Jeff, you were gonna work on. Is that what you emailed me, you said?
Yeah.
So maybe you could read it for everybody?
So we have been talking about mobile home and manufactured home. And it was actually an interesting discovery. The mobile homes were governed in, starting in 1974, they created the National Mobile Home Construction and Safety Standards Act. And then in 1975, they renamed it to the National Manufactured Homes Construction and Safety Standards Act and removed all references to mobile homes and changed them all to manufactured homes. So technically, according to HUD and that act of 1975, a mobile home is any manufactured home constructed prior to 1976. And it's an outdated term that is used only predominantly in historical senses. So using that, and then in New York State consolidated laws, they have a definition for factory manufactured home. And again, that act I mentioned has a definition for manufactured home. So this is all of them. Factory manufactured home, a structure designed primarily for residential occupancy, constructed by a method or system of construction whereby the structure or its components are wholly or in substantial part manufactured in manufacturing facilities intended or designed for permanent installation or assembly and permanent installation on a building site. That's verbatim from New York State consolidated laws.
This is for manufactured homes you're reading.
This is for factory manufactured homes, which are different. The primary difference is that a manufactured home can be built on a chassis. A factory manufactured home is not. And that's a primary difference according
So
to...
a mobile home is a manufactured home, but not the other way around.
A mobile home is a manufactured home, but it is not a factory manufactured home.
But a manufactured home is not necessarily a mobile home. It could be,
Correct,
yeah.
right.
So a factory manufactured home could be modular or a panelized house?
That's right.
Is that why we're doing?
That's right, yeah. So so then a manufactured home, which now replaces, it modernizes the mobile home. A manufactured home is a structure transportable in one or more sections, which in the traveling mode is 8 body feet or more in width or 40 body feet or more in length, or when erected on site is 320 or more square feet, and which is built on a permanent chassis and designed to be used as a dwelling with or without a permanent foundation and is connected to the required utilities.
So does that mean that every time we mention mobile home, we should say mobile or manufactured home?
We should say manufactured home,
Or just,
right? A mobile home only
Mobile home is a
relates to
subset
something
of a
from
manufactured
1976 or
home.
earlier, right? Sorry, prior to 1976, right? So with that definition of manufactured home, there's a couple things in there that I personally don't think necessarily need to be in there. The dimensions are, when it's in the traveling mode, 8 body feet or more in width by 40 body feet or more in length, which is 320 square feet, which is repeated in the next line. So simply eliminate that. So it's a structure transportable in one or more sections, which in the traveling mode or when erected on site is 320 or more square feet. And then I think because of our goal, part of our goal with dwelling units is that they're permanent, that they're not mobile, because mobile should be in a mobile trailer park or a camping vehicle, right? Is then we eliminate the built on a permanent chassis and eliminate without for permanent
I think
foundation.
for definition purposes, I think that's a lot more than we need to say. And that's mostly for the fact that the dimensions is not necessarily the outcome or the product.
Right, and yeah.
It's a cause of the fact that in transport, there's limitations and so on and so forth. That has nothing to do with our building code or anything else.
Yeah,
And
and-
as far as the minimum square footage, again, that doesn't really define whether it's a manufactured or not a manufactured. That's a definition by the code of what HUD determines as a livable accommodation.
Right.
As minimum square footage. So like financing wise, I think it's 620 square feet is a minimum square footage that you're allowed.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I only included it because that's how it was written, but I agree. I think that it should reference our own definition of dwelling, or code about dwelling, which is, I think our minimum is 400 square feet. So if we simply call it a dwelling unit with capital D, capital U, so it would be a structure transportable in one or more sections, designed to be used as a dwelling unit with a permanent foundation and connected to the
And
entire
the problem
utilities.
with the section issue is that, as Catherine brought up, is the panelized homes. They're not necessarily sections, they're walls.
Right, that's why that would
That are
qualify as
assembled on site.
that would be under factory manufactured home,
Right.
which is a definition we haven't had that I'm suggesting we add. Factory manufactured home covers the panelized homes or the modular homes.
how is a factory manufactured home different from a manufactured home?
A manufactured home has a permanent chassis,
Yeah,
and a factory manufactured home does not.
does not.
That's the principal difference.
Right, so
Right.
a manufactured home is what you would think, what we would normally call a mobile home.
Mhm.
Whereas a factory manufactured home can be those other types of modular structures.
Yeah, and also the other limitation, according to the legal definition by New York State, is that a manufactured home has those dimension specifics. A factory manufactured home does not have the dimensional specifics, right? So it could be smaller or larger, it could be made of 4 components instead of 2 or instead of 1.
Should we have a definition for a factory manufactured home
That's what I'm suggesting, yes.
in addition to manufactured home?
Yes.
Yes. that's
But
what
we
you-
don't need to have mobile home because we're changing mobile to manufactured.
Well, we have a mobile home park as a use, and so I think we need to define it, and we certainly have mobile homes in the town that predate 1976, I'm sure. So as a definition, I think we should simply state that was built prior to 1976.
You could also put, also known as,
Or, yeah, you could put
Yeah.
put them both together,
Or previously known as.
or previously known as.
Although,
but I think most people, when they go look for something, they're going to be looking for a mobile home.
yeah, I don't even know anymore what you would shop for, you know.
I mean, that's
You ask
what,
Alvarez, but-
you know, if I was looking, that would be what I would be looking for,
Yeah.
a mobile home.
Yeah. The other part that I proposed to the definition is that where HUD simply says a manufactured home constructed prior to 1976, I added that is built on a permanent chassis and is designed to be used with or without a permanent foundation. And then that further differentiates for
Right.
our code, right? So that if somebody's got a manufactured home that you or I might call a mobile home, but it's on a permanent foundation, it's not a chassis, that would not be considered a mobile home then. It would not have to be in a mobile home park.
So, going back to adding in this factory manufactured home, we don't have anything in our code that even talks about that.
Because we call them manufactured homes, and so
Right.
technically we're using the terms incorrectly, so we may have to go back into the code, the section of code on dwelling unit and simply add factory manufactured housing, just so it matches New York State consolidated laws. And we'd just be adding that term, right?
Well, the schedule of uses, we have mobile homes, we don't have manufactured homes.
Doesn't it say mobile homes not on a mobile home park and mobile
Has
homes
mobile
in a
home
mobile
park and
home?
also mobile home on individual lot,
Right.
which is prohibited in all districts.
Yeah, and in the very top section for residential uses, or it says single-family home, multifamily home, it doesn't say manufactured, right? I don't think it specifies.
I don't see, well, under residential uses, I don't see manufactured home.
Well, it would be in the very top section because it's a dwelling.
Yeah. No,
It
it's,
should be,
Yeah.
a factory manufactured
well,
home
this is
should be
it may be in the new one,
dwelling
it's not in the
section.
existing
Yes.
one.
Yes, yeah, so we should add that to the schedule as
Well,
well.
you know, other than financing, once a factory manufactured home is built, it's a home.
Right,
So it's a dwelling, it doesn't really need to be broken out in our code anywhere. I know with financing, some of the banks are, and even the insurance companies are saying if it's a manufactured home, we're not insuring it. So,
right,
so
and I think that's,
they're taking a stance, but that has really nothing to do with
Yeah.
us in our code.
But what about the fact that the New York State Consolidated Code differentiates? Does that matter if we don't differentiate and they do?
We're only looking for a definition for the work that's already been done in our code. So these definitions are supposed to be directly related to the codes within the book.
yeah. I think where we see it in a practical application is when we get a building permit application for what we've been calling a manufactured home, those plans don't include a foundational plan. They'll include a sketch that looks like a foundational plan, but Mike and I realized there's no engineering on it. And it says right on the plans that the homeowner or the purchaser must get engineered plans for that foundation. Because it is designed to be built on a permanent foundation, which is different than a manufactured home. A manufactured home is not by New York State law, or by federal law, not designed to be built on a permanent foundation. So that's the difference. So we need to change our language, I think, so that it matches the National Act, the New York State Consolidated Laws, and HUD, that a factory manufactured home is different than a manufactured home. I wish they used different terms, because it's confusing.
Did you see, Ian had some comments on mobile home. Did you see those?
I think I did. Yeah, I don't remember them offhand, but
A structure transportable in one or more sections and which is built on a permanent chassis and designed to be used as a dwelling with or without a permanent foundation when connected to the required utilities, including plumbing, heating, and so on.
Pretty
right,
much
that,
what I already
yeah,
said.
that
Okay.
part is verbatim from the
Okay.
National Mobile Home Construction and Safety
Okay,
Standards Act.
all right.
And it
Okay.
pretty much matches what we have.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Other than recognizing the fact that a modular, for lack of a better term, does not include plans for a foundation, you get a building permit to build a house. Is the process any different than
The process is the same, right? Well, the things that Mike would look for, or the building inspector would look for, the two primary things are the foundation plans designed by a licensed professional, and that the connecting apparatus is correct. So it requires particular structural components. So,
Dean doesn't want to go backwards, so we have to. And that is a valid point.
Yes.
I am not disagreeing with that.
So what Ian's mobile home suggestion was, where are you different other than adding the additional factory manufactured?
just keeping up with the times and what Congress did in 1975, which was to eliminate mobile home as a used definition. They changed all of their wording to be manufactured home. So, and because our law specifically uses mobile home in mobile home parks, I think it's important that we look at that distinction, because if you have something that has a permanent chassis, that's what's going to be in a mobile home park, most likely, right? So.
He does have he says something interesting here. He says a mobile home park is regulated, but if the mobile home does not meet the size test, the park escapes regulation.
Right, that goes back to something that's come up a lot, is if a definition is too definitive, then one could argue, well, I'm not 320 square feet,
Right.
therefore I'm not a mobile home. However, in the town, in order to be a dwelling unit, it has to be 400 square feet or more. So,
Okey-doke.
and we can certainly mull over this and come back to it, and I can go through and see, are there other places that we have to add that besides in the section on dwelling unit?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. And then the other one I was asked about was with through lots. We had talked about eliminating the definition of through lot, but then because we have through lots in the town, we thought we should keep the definition of through lot, but then we needed a section of code to deal with through lots in terms of setbacks. So I used 250-21, which is corner lots, and just modified that so it makes sense for a through lot. So on a corner lot, each street frontage shall be deemed to be a front street line, and the required yard along each such lot line shall be a required front yard. So then it goes on, there's more to it. So for a through lot, what I would propose is that it be 250-21.1A. On a through lot, each street frontage shall be deemed to be a front street line, and the required yard along such lot line shall be a required front yard. That's the same as a corner lot so far. B, street frontages on a through lot do not intersect in any way, which supports the definition of through lot, right? So the streets are on opposite sides. And then C, a through lot shall have 2 front yards, 2 side yards, and no rear yard. And then it's clear what the building envelope is for a through lot.
Did you email that to me?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
20 minutes ago. Right, all right, thanks.
Are you suggesting that should replace corner lot?
Yeah, I'm suggesting that
that
be added as section 250-21.1.
Not replace,
But
but
he said
it added
he
to corner
copied
lot.
Okay.
corner lots, corner lots definition and added in
Okay.
for through lot, a 21.1,
So it's a
A,
separate-
B,
right.
and C.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
They are very similar situation.
All
Correct.
right.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah, okay.
Is that mic turned on?
I don't know.
I can barely hear. That's
Well, it's not amplified in here, it's just
Yeah, it just goes
for
to
the
the,
TV.
Oh, okay. I thought it also works in the building, too.
yeah.
All right, so not looking to go further back,
Homework.
want to start for non-conforming building structure?
If we can jump ahead just a little bit, that might save us time. There's all these definitions for non-conforming building or structure, non-conforming lot, non-conforming sign, non-conforming use, and then non-conformity. And the very first sentence in non-conforming says, "A non-conforming use, lot, building, or other structure which existed lawfully, whether by variance or otherwise, on the effective date of this chapter, and which fails to conform to one or more of the provisions of this chapter or such amended," which is included in every definition above. So do we need each of those individual definitions? Or if we simply add the word sign, so it's a non-conforming use, lot, building, sign, or other structure, do we cover all of those definitions?
Well, we do, but I'm still not sure that we don't need to list them out.
Yeah, and I'm not either, which is why I ask.
I mean, I'm usually all for taking things out that don't need to be there because it's long enough, but
Is everything mentioned repeated in the larger definition?
we'd have to add sign.
Except for the
Correct.
missing sign.
So, Ian mentions on all 5 non-conforming definitions, the effective date of this chapter does not work since amendments occurred later than when the Chapter 250 was adopted and need to be taken into account to protect our residents. Change each time to read like "does not conform to the provisions of this chapter" related to, and then, bracketed as to what section or what have you, at the effective date of the provision of this chapter, first making such structure non-conforming, but did so conform prior to such effective date. But I disagree with that last part in the fact that it's saying that it was in conformity. There was no regulation prior, so it wasn't that it was in conformity, it was just there was no regulation.
Right. Yeah, I had a similar thought, was trying to come up with a much simpler way to state that, because the sections of our code have been ratified at different periods of time, some of them very recently, and then there are new laws that are written. And so I think if it says to this chapter, that was my question too, what do you do with the changes or the amendments? And then I think to Ian's point, if there's a new law that's written, like the short-term rental law, then you could potentially create a nonconformity, right?
So the only other thing that you did not put into the nonconformity is the use.
That's already there, a nonconforming
there.
use,
Oh,
lot building,
non-conforming
yeah.
use, okay.
Yeah, so the only word I added was sign.
I was going in order and I didn't,
And maybe it's enough to say in the second line, halfway through, on the effective date of the applicable chapter as amended.
How about also fails to conform to one or more of the provisions of this, I'm trying to think current, it's the current applicable law.
Most recent
Mm,
revisions or
Mhm.
most recent provisions of this chapter?
Yeah.
yeah,
And then it will stay, that will work forever.
right. And then on the end of the third line, we would add sign again, use lot, building, sign, or other structure. And then it gets long when it starts talking about the definition of actual construction, which is handy to have, but I don't know if we need that in there.
Yeah, that does not seem necessary to me. I mean, why are we defining it there?
Right, I think the common sense dictates what construction, how construction would be defined.
What do you think?
I'm just looking to see if we can get rid of all the others.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are some things that are mentioned in the others that could be important. For example, under non-conforming lot, it does say something about non-compliance with minimum parking setbacks shall not be construed to cause a lot to be non-conforming. But if that definition disappears, that whole sentence is gone.
In building and structure, it also talks about a fence.
Yeah, okay,
Mhm.
there you go. Fence shall not be construed, right. Again, if that definition disappears,
Mm.
that sentence is gone.
Mm-hmm.
So there are issues that are covered in the smaller definitions that could be that conceivably could be important
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
in some cases, right?
Right,
So that's the danger of if you simply get rid of them. And then under non-conforming use, there's a sentence at the end about an unlawful use prior to the effective date of this chapter is not a non-conforming use.
right, and that's covered under nonconformity.
So I think we would want to keep that.
Yeah, but that's in nonconformity already.
Oh,
It speaks, it has to be lawful,
Oh, it is there? Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah. But you're right, those other things are potentially important. And so if the decision is made to keep them all, I think, in my opinion, all of the other definitions are fine as is. I don't have any changes to them, except the whole referring to this chapter
Right,
thing.
so-
Right.
Right,
Not to lose any extra benefit by those definitions, I would say let's keep them.
Mhm.
I'll make the changes to the nonconformity.
And you have to make the same changes to all of them using that most recent,
Right.
whatever the
Mhm.
verbiage was.
yeah.
Okay.
Provisions of this chapter.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't say.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was big.
Anything, Russ? Anything? Usually good for chiming in something.
I was just thrilled to see your new definition for kennel.
Yeah? Do you like it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commercial.
Russ likes the kennel, for those that didn't hear on the TV. So, noxious use?
Russ Tompkins, Schultzville. I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up, but as you all are aware, we've had some litigation in the town over neighbors complaining of noxious odors and stuff from neighboring property. And this thing kind of opens up the can of worms.
Well, this is the definition. It shouldn't regulate the,
Yeah, I was trying to remember what section it was. I was just leafing
We're
through
gonna-
here.
Yeah, we're going to revisit that section
Okay,
to deal with the issues that you're raising.
Okay.
Separately from the definition.
okay, thank you.
So let's just, work on the definition here.
I don't see anything wrong with the definition, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Because it's saying the standards and criteria established by this chapter. So if we go back and fix 28,
Right,
then that'll,
that should be, yeah, that should take care of it, yeah.
and obviously this is original definition. All these things are in black that we've been working on, so we didn't make any
Now,
changes.
yeah, these were not changed.
Nuisance,
It's fine.
nursery,
So I realized I didn't introduce myself last time. Jeff Newman, Municipal Code Enforcement Inspector, Town of Penn. On the third line, it refers to flowers, shrubs, or vegetables for sale, which then confuses it with a more traditional farm operation. New York State Ag and Markets Laws uses the word vines where we use the word vegetables, and does not use the word vegetables in relation to nursery. And I think that may be an important difference between a crop agriculture and the business of nursery,
So it would say which grows trees, plants, flowers, shrubs, or vines?
or vines for sale.
Nursery is not considered an agricultural,
It is considered agriculture and it is protected as an agricultural
Right.
use, but Ag and Markets Law specifically does not include vegetables in the
right?
definition,
Oh.
right?
okay.
And not that we have to include vines, but they do. But I think we should not include vegetables. Otherwise, we don't need a difference to differentiate between a nursery and a farm. Right. The other thing is in the next sentence, such establishment is permitted to sell primarily those products, and primarily is suggested to be crossed out. However, Ag and Markets Laws, it protects farms to be able to sell products of neighboring farms or other local products to a certain degree.
So we should reinstate primarily?
I believe, yes.
Well, but then what about the last sentence?
Purchase of the products or produce for resale is not permitted.
but I think that's why we took primary out, was because they're allowed to sell from other neighboring farms. With that, throughout the state.
But that,
No, but
that contradicts the last sentence.
they wouldn't be purchasing it for resale. The other farm would have their product there to be sold, and that would go directly to that other farm.
Not necessarily, I mean, you look,
That's how it's defined for farmers markets in New York State.
Yeah, but
but that's farmers
but
markets.
that's like a farmer's market.
But
So if-
another farm could actually buy
Yeah.
the items that they don't grow and resell them.
Yeah, not under this definition. Maybe if we keep the last sentence in.
Well, what if we put primarily back in? Then
But
it'll,
you'd have to take out the final sentence as well if you want them to be able
well,
to.
but if we put primarily back in, then you can
No, it's,
buy and
Not
resell.
unless you delete the last sentence.
I'm not following that. Such establishment,
Oh,
sorry,
well,
such
yeah,
establishment
you're
is
right.
to me,
permitted to sell
means
primarily
that
those
majority
products.
are-
It says not, it clearly says not permitted, yeah, you're right.
Just have to pick which way, but you look at like the,
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Hahn, he, I would guess, doesn't grow all of those pumpkins that he sells. He probably purchases and resells some of them,
Mm-hmm.
which would be, but he's not a nursery, so that's a farm stand.
Oh, that's interesting. I was reading that last sentence totally differently.
What's that?
I was reading it that if you have a nursery, I couldn't go to your nursery to purchase it and then resell it.
No.
So, so your nursery can't be a wholesale nursery, it has to be a retail
Is that
nursery.
how you're reading it?
That's how I was reading that.
Oh,
It's not a wholesale operation.
so you mean the customer is reselling it, not the person? who-
Right? I'm not allowed to sell for resale.
But then, but what would be the context of the second
Okay.
part of that sentence? Nor are machine sales or repair to be construed as accessory uses of the property. of a
Right,
nursery.
yeah, no, that's, I
To me,
agree with
that
you, right.
means that it's
Right,
meant
yeah, I
to be.
completely see how you're reading it. If the first word were sale of products instead of purchase of products, then it would have been the meaning I was reading the first time.
You said change purchase to sale of products? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
What if we just
I'm
cut
kinda
off
missing
from?
what you're doing here, but wouldn't it make sense to put primarily back in and then take out purchase of products? Because it says primarily means there could be some other products purchased to be sold there, maybe from another supplier or another and take out purchase of products for, or produce for resale is not permitted. I mean, if.
I would take out the last two sentences, because
Yeah.
I don't see
And machine
either of
sales doesn't make sense at
those
all.
adding value to what a nursery is.
Or definition, it's regulation.
Right.
Both of those are about regulation.
So if you put primary back in and then delete
No, I would
purchase of
take
products
out that whole
through the end.
sentence. I would take out from the sale of,
From such
or
establishment.
vines for sale and end it, period. The rest is all regulation, and again, we're not trying to regulate things from the definition.
Right, we're just defining it.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
And then the only other thing that Ian had said was change, delete building and change property to same lot or adjoining lots on which such activities are occurring. But again, I think that adds in,
Right, and we just eliminated the word property from the definition. So in terms of buildings, again, Ag and Markets protects buildings as part of the operation.
Right.
So I think we need to leave that in. But I agree with eliminating the last two sentences. I think that's
so
great.
I think we just delete the last two sentences, solves any question as to,
Starting with such.
Correct.
starting with such. Yep.
So then I think the question is that already stated in the regulations on the section on nursery or not? And I'll take a look at that and see.
Well, that's where it should be regulated.
Which it should, yeah, so if it
needs
doesn't
to be
say that.
fixed, it should be fixed.
That's what I
but
mean, yeah, we'll look at
that's-
that. Separate.
This is not supposed to regulate.
Right.
That is.
Yep, so we can take a look at that and see if we need to add it, but yeah, okay, thanks.
All right. Nursery school, we basically already done because it's daycare facility. Nursing home is deleted, correct?
Yep.
And then occupancy.
And under occupancy, Ian's saying delete building.
Use of a structure or land.
This issue came up at a recent planning board meeting. Were you at that
Occupancy?
meeting, Jeff? Yeah. It had to do in the context of an application, I think, for a short-term rental.
Right, well, what
what
came
the
up
def-
was not occupancy, but occupied. A number of our laws refer to occupied, owner-occupied for short-term rental, for example. A hosted short-term rental must be owner-occupied. That's different than occupancy. And what we discovered is that New York State, there's very little definition for occupied. The best that I found was case law that defines occupied as to hold the ability to use, which doesn't mean that you have to be in residence. It just means that you have the right to use it at your discretion.
Well, we have a definition that we're proposing on owner-occupied. A premise occupied by the owner as his principal domicile, the place where the owner resides as his full-time residence.
Right, yeah, and we can look at that because that wouldn't apply to a vacation home, but
That
it
was-
would still
that
be
was the issue
owner-occupied, and that's
was
part of the
being
issue.
discussed at the planning board.
Right. The other thing that came up in a training this past Saturday was the district court it was a case in New Orleans where their laws regulated an owner occupation, so something being owner occupied, and it was actually found to be not constitutional because it's restricting a person's right to be somewhere else. That hasn't happened in New York State yet. Things like that tend to spread, so we may find that, but it was found to be not unconstitutional, which we all found very fascinating. But because owner-occupied was unconstitutional because then as a requirement, because it was restricting a person's ability to conduct commerce across state lines. So a person couldn't live in Texas and have a short-term rental in New Orleans, based on the New Orleans law, and that was deemed to be restrictive on the individual rights of that person. So we can regulate use and we can regulate activities, but we can't necessarily, and I don't fully understand this because I'm not a lawyer, but this is what is presented is we can't necessarily regulate that. Now again, in New York State, it hasn't ever come up, right? So.
What does that do, say, for example, to B and Bs?
Right?
That throws out the whole
Exactly,
definition.
that is a real question about all of that, and like I said, it has never come up in New York State case law.
The only difference is that we allow for the other.
That's right.
It's just that we're less restrictive on the owner occupied.
And that's a big difference,
Well-
right? I think that's an important difference.
For the short-term rentals,
Right.
Right.
not for B and Bs.
Well, again, it's kind of all lumped into that owner occupied, hosted, non-hosted definitions, and the restrictions are on the non-hosted versus the hosted. I mean, it does allow for if you're hosting it or you're not hosting it, meaning that you're living there or you're not living there. So it's not that we're not allowing it, it's that we're defining the definition differently for each. Or we're making the limitations different on each.
Right.
Well, okay, but if you come in, or if someone comes in and with an application for a permit to have a bed and breakfast, one of the conditions is that it be owner occupied.
Hmm.
So that still is problematic in terms of what Jeff is saying.
Well, again, it's not case law in New York, so it's not a problem at
We're not
this
gonna worry
point.
about it.
Correct,
now.
right, we don't, it's nothing we have to worry about now, but,
The heads up.
right. But it was brought up because there is a difference between occupancy and occupied, right? And so we're on occupancy right now, and Ian had suggested that we eliminate the word building. We do define building and we define structure.
So you say
They're very-
keep both.
They're very similar, and I don't see the harm in keeping both words,
Okay.
so.
So you want to eliminate building?
Yeah, no, I'm saying
Ian
to
does,
keep it.
But Jeff does not.
Iron
Right.
does.
And it appears so repeatedly in our code, building or structure. And we do have structures that aren't buildings, right? So a sign is a structure that's not a building. So,
All right.
Office. Establishment for the conduct of business or service.
Do we need to say anything about it's very broad, the conduct of business or services. So, for example, I'm thinking about the agricultural events venue. That's a business or a service, but it isn't an office. Is that important for us to consider, or is something that's broad and vague?
Well,
all right?
office is pretty generic, right?
Does it have to be interior, for example, or a certain type of business or service?
Well, I am saying change it to a space within a building in which people are engaged in business activities, but not manufacturing, repair, construction, sales of goods presented in such space or similar activities.
I think that seems implicit to me in what an office is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the first part of that definition. I think the other part is good, but potentially unnecessary.
A space within a building in which people engage in business activities, is that what you're saying? Period?
Yeah, it's still pretty vague, though.
But it does fix, to some extent, the
Yes.
the ag
How is-
events question.
Right, but then a retail establishment would be an office, so Golden Russet would be an office.
Based on his definition or
Yes.
the one that's here?
Based on using just the first part of Ian's definition. And the
Yes, but
existing one
except
both.
for the last part of it, sales of goods presented in such
And that's why it
space.
might be important to keep that, or some portion of it, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't saying cutting it
Yeah,
off.
no, I was.
So you're basically suggesting we use Ian's definition?
I think so, yeah. I don't have it in front of me, and it's a little bit wordy, but
A space within a building in which people engage in business activities, but not manufacturing, repair, construction, sales of goods present in such space or similar activities. That's what he
yeah,
proposed.
I'm good with that.
All right.
Official map We didn't change the definition, but seems like everybody always questions the fact of provisions of Section 273 of the town law. Is usually what you bring up, Elliot.
What is section 270, 273?
Well, we're only dealing with 250, so we don't have that,
Hmm.
those sections. I couldn't tell you what they were unless you look them up online.
We can take a look at them and see what they are for the next meeting.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, I don't recall that this issue ever came up for discussion at any meetings or anything.
No, it's original language,
Yeah,
so.
exactly, right.
Open space is all new. Ryan had thrown in change automobiles to vehicles. When you compare this definition to each place it is used, it seems to be used erroneously in a few places.
Well, that's easy enough to change.
May be contained in one or more separate open space. I think on the second to last line, lots needs to be plural, but that's very minor.
Vehicles would also include, presumably would include trucks and tractors and things of that sort.
Right.
Where are you saying about open space?
The second line from the bottom, contained in one or more separate open space lots?
No, I was saying, I got the lots, the plural.
What was Elliot saying?
Yeah,
that?
didn't you say something about open space?
No, just the automobiles. Vehicles would be more, he just said vehicles would be, cover more options, so he likes it.
Oh, okay.
Other than that, I think it's fine.
I had raised a couple of questions here about open space. Apparently, he found some inconsistencies.
That's what he says, but he's not telling it where.
Well, we'd have to look, for example, I guess we'd have to look at yard. You'd have to jump ahead and look at the first one, because he says, the definitions for yard refer to open space, but the definition for open space says it excludes much yard area.
I think
How
that,
can this be reconciled?
yeah, but when you look at yard and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, in yard front, it says an open area.
Hmm.
In yard rear, it says an open space.
Mm,
I think that if you make them all an open area,
mm.
then we eliminate that the conflict between open space. It feels like when you read them through quickly, it looks like they use the words interchangeably.
Yeah, but I think,
All right, well, we
says
can
here-
worry about when we get to yard,
yeah,
fixing yard, but
Well, but
are we okay with the open space part?
Yeah, I just to comment on the yard, I think it's just an inconsistency, and they should all say open area, because we don't define that. We would define open space, and that would eliminate that confusion. The thing about open space, the last sentence was suggested to be deleted. And which I think is fine, it's very repetitive, but it's the only place that water is mentioned. Do we think we need to say land or water, either left in natural state at the very beginning, or water is assumed to be open space and doesn't have to be included?
Well,
Why would open space not include private yards within 100 feet of a principal structure?
My guess is, excuse me,
The
because
rationale
that would fall under an open area of a yard. Within 100 feet of a house is too small to be really, I think, what the intent of open space is meant to be.
Okay, all right.
The only question I've got on that is, shall not include private yards within 100 feet of the principal structure. Well, you might have a 100-foot setback in the front yard, but the backyard might be 50 feet. So I think that 100 feet, that's all around it, is kind of, doesn't sound right. I would say within the established yard setbacks, instead of 100 feet front, rear, and side, because like I say, some places your side yard's only 50 feet, so why do they have 100 feet all the way around a building excluded?
Well, they're just excluding them as being open space.
Right, I think that's what they mean, is that it's an open area,
Yeah, I
and you
don't
can
think
have
they're
as much
referring
open
to
area as you want,
setbacks
but
specifically.
it doesn't qualify as open space until you get beyond that 100 feet. Because open space I think the intent is that open space is meant to be a large area.
Well, I don't know how important that open space comes up in other regulations.
I think mostly it's probably the comprehensive plan, that the comprehensive plan is designed to protect open spaces. And so if that within 100 feet of your house was considered an open space, it would be more restrictive on the homeowner because it might be regulated as open spaces are regulated. Otherwise, it's just your yard. So I think this gives more leeway to the homeowner.
Do you want to say within 100 feet or less?
No, I think 100 feet is fine. Because if you're on a lot that doesn't have 100 feet around your house, then your lot doesn't have any open space. It might have open area, but it doesn't have open space.
What about this comment Ian makes about parking? Section 63 says parking will be usable open space, but the open space definition excludes parking spaces. That would appear to be contradictory.
Yeah, again, similar to yards, and I'd have to look at it to see, but it'd probably change space to area in 63.
63?
Would that work?
Well, we could just fix it. Again, this is a definition from yard, so when we get the yard, we can fix the inconsistencies.
Yeah, what Elliot just said was from yard?
Yeah.
Okay,
Where
yeah.
is-
And I think that's just a consistency for us to apply, is that we're always referring to open space and open area as two different things. Open space being regulated and open area not.
So then the add-on to that is open space usable. Again, all these just talk about land. It doesn't really talk about water. And since we have a lot of water yards, lots, I wonder how that,
I'm wondering about the need for this definition, open space usable. How does it differ than open space in practice? And is it used anywhere in the code that we need to define it?
well, it's free of structures, whereas open space could have a structure, correct?
If it's devoted to
agriculture.
agriculture or other practices meant to preserve the enjoyment of the open space. So a pavilion, for example, could be in open space.
Right, but
Right.
that would be a difference. Right.
Also talks about an unenclosed portion of the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brand-new definition, so part of what I'm curious is, where did it come from? And obviously, it was thought to be needed, so I'm curious where it was needed, but I don't know.
So not fighting to say that we should take it out. Is there anything in here that should be changed?
I don't think so. I mean, not without knowing what other codes reference it. but-
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Ian says, I think the intent here is to define a portion of open space that qualifies as usable. In addition to two definitions are inconsistent. Open space says no paving, storage, parking, circulation of vehicles, but usable open space says no driveways, access roads, parking spaces. Also, open space says no structures unless serving the open space use or enhancing the access or use of open space. Unusual or usual open space says no structures that interfere with functionality or use of open space. I would suggest that this be harmonized and the open or the usable open space definition read as follow. A usable open space, unenclosed open space which is no less than 15 feet in width at any point and which is available and accessible to all occupants of the buildings on the ground containing such open space and part of a common development scheme for purpose of active or passive outdoor use. And then he notes, I changed 8 to 15 as I do not see how a strip of land 8 feet wide is usable other than access to a lot. I mean,
Yeah, basically.
so what do we think about that change?
Well, I think he's right that there is some inconsistency between the two definitions. Although, I gotta say, in retrospect, Neil's definition of usable open space seems pretty cumbersome. Is there any kind of a New York State or whatever definition of what open space is? Do we-
I don't know offhand. I could look.
I wonder if there isn't something we can work with.
Doing a quick search of the code, I don't see anywhere that refers to usable open space. Usable is used for aspects of buildings, aspects of lots, cluster developments, but it's only a usable something else. I don't see usable open space anywhere. And I think it can be presumed that open space is meant to be used. So again, I don't know, except from a regulatory standpoint, the extra definition just seems to add regulation, not definition, if we don't have regulation.
Well, if it's not used in the code anywhere, you know what I'm about to say.
I mean, the only place one point that I could see it being mentioned would be, sometimes they have restrictions on like the building envelope.
Mm-hmm.
So you're allowed to build within the envelope and the rest is supposed to be open space as not being touched. That's the only place that I would think that it would be used other than the comprehensive plan and a defined use or,
Yeah, and I think that's true for the definition of
I mean,
open space. It's the open space
is almost always
usable.
by
Right.
its very nature.
Right, so why are we defining
Right.
both?
Isn't that the concept of open space, is that it can be
That
used?
that's how I would see it, yes. Yeah. It's there to be used, it's why we protect it, right? It's for the use and enjoyment of the
so should we
people.
delete the usable?
That's what I think,
It's
yeah.
not referred to anywhere?
Not that I found, no.
Maybe we should look again at the definition of open space. I mean, just make sure, especially if we're not going to have a definition for usable. I mean, is there anything there that should be changed?
I don't think so, because there's nothing in the definition that says that any part of it cannot be used. Right? And in fact, it refers to enhancing the access thereto and use thereof.
All right.
So the next word is owner. Excuse me. Ian had,
It was not
this
too-
definition
is a mess.
is a mess. That's a legal term.
Yeah, right.
Legal title and right to property are two totally different things. I have assumed all along that when the code refers to an owner, it means the person holding title. If that is not the intent, then every use of owner needs to be re-examined.
Oof.
I would suggest the definition read, owner, the person, or plural, holding free title to the lot, or plural, or structure, or plural, in question, and when fee title has been split between multiple persons, then such persons as have the paramount title at the relevant points in time.
Does he say free title or fee title?
Fee.
Fee, okay.
Fee
All right,
title,
thank
yeah,
you.
fee title.
So, pardon my ignorance on this point, but in the case of a mortgage, would this definition of owner still relate to the person that has the mortgage as opposed to the bank?
That's why I asked the question about.
Title is never in the bank's name. The bank is only a lien holder,
Right, right.
or the
So-
mortgagee.
Well,
Right.
wouldn't the owner always be the person who holds title? I mean, isn't that implicit in the definition of an owner?
Well, so the one thing when he mentions fee title,
Okay.
you own land as fee simple, but you may own a condominium through, let's say, an association, or more importantly, a co-op through a corporation that you own a share in. You don't own it in fee, you own it in the sense that the association or the cooperative board owns the title of the property. You only own shares within, and you're given right to use a particular unit that you've
Right.
quote-unquote purchased.
Right. So by having fee simple, or how does he word it? The whole in fee title to the lots or structures, then that.
That implies that you own it
Yeah,
directly.
yeah. So even if there's a lien holder.
Doesn't matter
right,
if
And
there's
then,
a
and then he deals with the
Co-op is
other,
like a
like a
right to
co-op,
property,
with the last part that says,
A right to use.
when fee title has been split between multiple persons, and such persons as have the paramount title at the relevant points in time. That would cover things like co-ops or homeowners associations or,
Well, we don't have any in the town, so I don't think we need
Right.
to define it. But when the condominium owns the property, you only own within those four walls. So your name is not necessarily on a title, even though it could be on a title. And, then people mix up the the word townhouse, because you can own a townhouse fee simple, which means that it's attached to the other buildings, but you own the front and back lots, you know, space to it.
Who owns the wall in the middle?
It's jointly owned, so you own from your side and they own from their side.
Oh,
And,
Where in a
and
condo, you only own from the sheetrock in. You don't own the common walls.
oh, okay.
The
interesting.
association does.
And we don't have that in our schedule of use. We have a multifamily dwelling, but that's owned by one person and the other families presumably rent, right? So we don't have a condominium.
Other than the
or-
fact that we could have a two-family house, but it's all one
So
owner on
one
both
owner.
sides.
Right,
So
right,
it's not just because we have a common wall.
yeah,
We don't have really any attached houses that I
right.
know of, right? So
I don't think so. Right. I'm fine with his definition as proposed.
Ian's definition is much more precise than Neil's, there's no question about that. If you want to just swap one for the other?
Yep.
Okay.
So then owner occupied, the two clauses here are inconsistent as one could be true and not the other. I suggest using the first clause only.
Well, it does kind of say the same, well, Ian doesn't think it's the same thing twice, but it does kind of say the same thing twice.
Yes, it does sound,
So and at the colon, and just stop there is what he's suggesting?
Yep.
How does this apply to a second home or a vacation home?
Well, the only thing that it's saying is it's a principal
Principal,
domicile.
right?
What is the, yeah, define, what's, how do you know?
And also says full-time residence. If both clauses are kept, it says full-time residence as well. And we have a lot of people for whom they suddenly wouldn't be owner occupied.
But they claim this as their,
Second home.
Right.
no, their primary residence is what I was going to say.
So, certainly some do, right? Right, and some don't.
But as Ian says, the second part of that sentence is redundant, and I would agree to delete it. And as far as what is a person's principal residence, that should be defined within the code as to what we are accepting as being owner occupied. This is only defining what is.
Right, and this is where Elliot had mentioned before, that it comes up with the short-term rental and the requirement that the host should be owner-occupied.
Right.
And we don't have a definition of occupied. New York State doesn't have a definition of occupied. And I actually mentioned this training we were on Saturday, and the lawyer that I was talking to, she agreed with that statement. She said, yes, it's a very vague concept. So,
I think the idea, as I remember with the issue with the short-term rental is the applicant had two residences on the property and wanted to move from rent one and live in the other, or in some cases, switch. In other words, live in the big one, rent the small one, but if someone wanted to rent the big one, they were going to go live in the small one. So they would still be on the same property, but in two different structures, two different buildings.
Yeah, I would go
So which of
along.
those would be basically, which of those would be the
Right.
principal dwelling?
I mean, and again, the property itself is still owner occupied.
Yes, the property was just single owner, right. The buildings were not, but yes, the property was. So, anyway. So we're just going to do what Ian suggested on that one?
I
Drop
think
the
so.
second part of it,
Yeah.
keep the first part?
I'm concerned about the principal domicile. And if a person owns land without a house, does that mean that land is never owner occupied?
It's not occupied.
Well, but it's
vacant
not,
land.
it's not premises,
Right.
it's just land. Premises, doesn't premises imply a building or a structure or a house?
Premises is a building, yes.
Or a house or something?
Yeah, typically, right. Yeah, that's just that's my only concern about it, is that we're regulating out or defining out people who don't live in the town as their principal dwelling, principal residence, to use the IRS term.
Well, they do that with the STAR program.
What do you mean?
You're not entitled to the STAR unless it's your principal residence.
Right, right. But there are people who have homes here that are not their principal residence.
And then don't get the STAR program.
That's right, they don't get the STAR, but then they also, by this definition, would not be owner-occupied.
Right.
That house would not be owner-occupied.
So they could not have a short-term rental, should they so desire.
Well, they couldn't have a B and B,
Right.
but they could have a short-term rental, sure.
As a non-hosted.
Right, it'd be
non-hosted.
that, yes, the
Right.
excuse me.
Right.
So I
That'd
think
be
that's what you
non-hosted.
mean.
So, so then somebody who has a vacation home or second home in the town of Clinton would never, that building would never be owner-occupied.
I think the issue that you bring up would be more important if there was, let's say, 2 units on the same property.
Mhm.
Because obviously, it's not hosted if it's one building and you're renting it out. So it'd still be not
Specific to
hosted.
short-term rental, correct.
Specific to short-term rental.
Right.
But Jeff brings up a valid point, was that you're taking a fairly sizable portion of the homes in our town and calling them not owner occupied because those people that own that house aren't considering it their primary dwelling. I don't know that it matters, but it does eliminate a whole bunch of people
Right.
from that definition, which I don't.
And that's my concern. And short-term rentals is the one example that we're using, that because that most easily comes to mind. But there may be other examples. I mean, bed and breakfast is another one, but that one says that it must be owner-occupied. So if you're going to do that, you're going to be there. I don't know what other examples are in the code currently, but
Let me read something that shows up here. I don't know where this site is, but Dean would probably know. An owner-occupied property is a piece of real estate in which the person who holds the title or owns the property also uses the home as a primary residence. The term owner-occupied is commonly associated with real estate investors who live in a property and rent out separate spaces to tenants.
and what is that from?
I don't know where,
My first question is, how do you
Rocket Mortgage, could it be rocketmortgage.com? Is that who it is?
Maybe.
own the home without having the title? Is my first question to that definition.
Right.
Well, you could be a renter and then you're not an owner.
And you're not an owner. I don't know why is that, that's my first question about that.
Fine, well, yeah, I mean, I would agree, it seems redundant,
And then,
sure.
like I said, I'm not sure that this matters, but it is,
Yeah, I would just want to know where it would hurt somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Or restrict somebody. Now, as far as insurance goes, as far as mortgage financing go, I mean, they're very, specific that it's a second home if it's not your primary. So we don't consider it owner occupied, we consider it a second home. Maybe splitting a hair because you're still occupying it as your second home and you may not rent it,
Right.
it's just a weekend home.
Right, so someone could apply for a hosted short-term rental certificate on a second home that they only rent as to short-term renters when they're there.
Then that
And it would still would not be their principal residence, which
would
then,
be hosted,
because they would only rent
Right.
to lodgers when they're on site.
Right.
But do we say they have to be owner occupied or do we say they have to be currently?
The short-term rental law says
currently on
owner
site?
occupied. It says owner occupied for hosted, it's owner occupied, and the owner has to be on site
But
during, while the
short-term
lodgers are
rental
on
doesn't
site.
differentiate between primary dwellings and secondary dwellings, it's simply whether the person is on site or not.
Right,
but it says owner occupied.
That would be the one thing that maybe we'd have to modify the short-term rental to say that you just have to be on site.
Right, it doesn't require it
Right,
to be your
take
primary
away the
residence.
use of the word, the
Owner
definition,
occupied.
owner occupied, and
Right.
just
Mhm.
make it clear they have to be.
Well, because if we say that's, you get a contradiction there, because here we're saying it's a primary residence, and there we're saying it doesn't have to be.
You're just gonna
You
be
just
there.
have to be
right.
there, so we'd have to,
Right.
yeah.
So-
we'd have to-
And the intent is that someone's there to monitor and
Right,
make sure there's no
Right.
loud noises and parties and
right, right,
reckless
Right.
behavior.
right,
Right,
right.
which is why it's only a certificate, not the permit.
So we'd have to amend the STR law to be consistent with the definition.
Right.
Karolina Maksianova, Deer Hill Road. My recollection of distinction between owner-occupied or not hosted or non-hosted was to be specifically allowing people who live here to give them a chance to rent their houses with lower kind of barrier, right? So removing the requirement to be actual resident or principal owner of the property who lives there kind of opens the door to someone getting a temporary tenant to
That's
be
not what
there
we're
and
talking about.
Okay.
All we're saying is that, because we are right, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are right with you. What we're saying is we can't use the term
Right.
owner occupied. We have to define it differently in that short-term rental law, because you might not be considered owner occupied, but you could be present in that home to monitor it. Now, you're
Right.
saying that if it's not your primary
If
residence,
it's not
you
a
don't
per-
want to allow
Maybe
it?
the term is the permanent resident, but it's not just someone, right? Because someone could be there and
Right.
it could be anybody. You could have a friend come and stay for a few weeks and be there, and all of a sudden you have a hosted short-term
That's
rental.
what she's, yeah, I think that's what she's saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just, yeah.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know the
and I agree, because, I mean, that is that is our goal in the hosted short-term rental, right? So our definition of owner is one who holds title. So if our short-term rental law simply removes the word occupied and says that the owner must be present on site while lodgers are on site,
That fixes both
then it
things.
fixes it, right? Because then it can't be a family member of the owner, it's the person who's on the title is defined as owner.
But it doesn't have to be their principal domicile.
Correct, right, because we're saying owner occupied is principal domicile.
So in that case, then I think we're all right with
So what are we
owner.
gonna do with the definition? Follow Ian's advice and drop the second part of it?
Yes.
I would say we could drop the second part of it because it is redundant
Okay.
and doesn't add any extra clarification.
Right, and it eliminates a huge portion of our population, even if they have their principal dwelling here, it's not their full-time residence, right? Because they're not here full-time. Right, and that actually was where part of where we got to when we were researching the word occupied for a short-term rental, is that one of the suggested definitions or ways of looking at it said that something about must be there full-time, and that technically would restrict you from going to the grocery store, right? And so, and I think that's where the case law I was looking at was defining occupied as to possess, to hold the ability to use, which is probably more broad than what we want, right? But we don't have a definition of occupied. So by keeping in principal domicile, it helps define occupied.
Well, even to say that
Right.
someone is residing there as their primary residence, which primary, let's say, is, 6 months and 1 day, that means that they technically could be outside the property the other 6 months.
Right, because we're eliminating the full-time phrase that's here, right? Right, so it becomes principal, which just means, like you said, 6 months and 1 day, right? And I think leaving that principal domicile is important, because otherwise we're just defining owner occupied as a premises occupied by the owner, which isn't enough, right? Doesn't tell us what occupied is. So if the decision is to keep principal dwelling in there, then that is what defines owner occupied. That's the nut right there, right? So.
Okay.
So the other question I would have is, should we change his to there?
Or his or her?
But it's not meant to be gender specific.
I know, but we've been clarifying certain things throughout the chapter that way.
There is incorrect English,
Well, I'm just,
although it does seem to be in common usage nowadays.
Oh,
Don't go,
Well, what would you suggest?
I would use his or her. I'm a big fan of his or her, but a lot of people don't like that because they think it's cumbersome.
I mean, I could put a slash her in there.
Yeah, let's just do that.
That's fine. Yeah.
Does the word "the" suffice?
The owner as.
You could do that, I suppose, if you want.
Oh,
You could do that.
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
That would solve the problem.
Well done.
Okay.
Okey-doke.
Are we done?
Parent parcel?
Are we in the same boat with the effective date of this chapter with this one? Do we want to change that? You should just go to your chair.
Sorry. Again, I don't know why this is here. We have a definition of parcel.
It's, Ian
What's-
says it shows
what's
up in
parent parcel?
section 51.
Section 51.
51, letter F is the only place he says it shows up in the,
All right, what is that?
well, 51 is farming, oddly enough. 51F.
Okay, I don't
There is no F.
see it. Well, 51, yeah, it's, maybe you don't have, you can come look.
Oh, that's on the revision. Yeah, I do have that. Sorry, I thought you meant in the original.
Oh, yes, excuse me, in 1, it says,
Where
"The
is it?
following standards shall be applied in the review of any application for a site plan, special
Yeah,
use
there you go.
permit,
Yep,
subdivision approval involving a parent parcel of land that would be developed for non-agricultural purposes where the parent parcel, colon," and we continue. But why? What's the, why, what,
I've never heard the term. I have no idea.
I mean, the definition literally is parcel, so why
Yeah,
are we?
I don't know. I don't know.
Can we just eliminate parent from,
Well, then, the
51F?
question is, Dean, would you eliminate, would you go back to 51 and eliminate parent parcel? Or would you just leave it in as a definition because it occurs and it's not really? It's the same as a parcel. It's the
Have you ever come across the term, Jeff?
no.
Parent parcel?
And it doesn't appear in the current code anywhere,
No,
except in relation to families.
nowhere, huh?
No, this was all new, it was
The new part,
added
yeah.
in.
right.
I mean,
But it
technically-
could certainly just say involving a parcel of land that would be developed for non-agricultural uses,
yeah,
where
can
the
I-
parcel.
Can I see that? I don't,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So what are you gonna do?
So it's here, and then that's where it occurs.
Well, but if you take out parent and just say parcel, you can't define it by saying parcel. You have to say something else. Because you're just repeating the word that you're defining.
But,
So this is relevant to a subdivision, so the parent parcel only applies to the subdivision, not the site plan or special use permit. And subdivision approval involving a parent parcel of land that would be developed for non-agricultural purposes with the parent parcel. So this to me sounds like what they mean is a parcel prior to the subdivision. So essentially you think of that, of the larger parcel being the parent and then the
Oh, is that what you
subdivision
think it
parcel being
means?
Right, the offspring.
but,
But the
The
definition does,
doesn't fit that.
no, definition does
Right,
not say
That's how I
that.
read this.
well, that makes more sense,
Right.
yes.
All right. Then the definition should be different than what it says.
How would you define that
Then,
situation?
then maybe it is a parcel of land legally. in
Original
exist-
parcel?
Something like that,
I'm
yeah.
sorry?
The
Yeah.
original
The
parcel?
original parcel intended for subdivision.
Something like that.
Because then it doesn't mean that it has to be subdivided, but the purpose of it is subdivision. So if somebody is coming in front of the planning board with a proposed subdivision, they can refer to the parent parcel as the original parcel.
Well,
Right.
except,
But if it's not approved, then it still remains that that individual
Except
parcel.
in 51F1, it's, the way it's written, the concept of a parent parcel also applies to site plan and special use permit, not just subdivision. So if that's the intent, then 51F1 needs to be amended to specifically refer to subdivision.
Well, but it says, they're commas, right? So it's any application for a site plan, comma, special use permit, comma, and subdivision approval involving a parent parcel of land. So if it was to apply to site plan and special use permit, there would be a comma after subdivision. Right? Subdivision's not part of an interjection. It applies,
Necessarily.
it applies to, grammatically, that would be correct.
I read it as applying to all three.
Right, but then there would have to be a comma after subdivision.
Not necessarily.
How not?
I don't think so. And I would
I
disagree with you
mean,
on
you
that.
could include the word "that" after subdivision to make it more clear, but,
Actually, you know, I tell you what would make it clear along what you say would be to say, site plan, comma, special use permit, comma, and subdivision approval involving a parent parcel of land.
So this is,
No, it's too confusing, Jeff. It could mean either one. It could go either way.
yeah, because of the commas, if you
Yeah.
look at it as a list,
Yeah, yeah.
right, it's a 3-item list.
Yeah.
And the last item starts with "and" subdivision approval, ends with parent parcel : So A, B, C, D, E, F, G only apply to subdivision approval involving a parent parcel.
so not the site plan and special use permit.
Well,
Right, so,
well then,
right, so
what
the
about
following
part-
standards shall be applied in the review of any application for a site plan. So just take that one phrase. And then A says, meets the standards for residential cluster development set forth in
Right.
25042. If somebody was coming in front of you with a site plan for an agricultural event venue, they would not need to meet the residential cluster development standards. Right.
This, I mean, this appears to me to be,
except, go ahead.
this is written for when a farm wants to become a
The
subdivision.
subdivided, right.
Except if it all has to do with subdivision, if A through little e only refer to subdivision, then why does one even mention site plan and special use permit? It's beside the point.
Well, you're right.
It just adds an element of confusion, if that's in fact the case. Just talk about subdivision. I mean, that's really what it's about, right? Then it becomes clear. Then you would say the following standards shall be applied in the review of any application for subdivision approval involving a parent parcel of land that would be developed and so on.
Right, so the title for F, and Elliot, I think you're right, the title for F is Standards for Residential Development,
Right,
right?
right.
So the site plan and special use permit mentioned in 1 are specific to residential development, right? So that residential development, the point is about subdivisions. And so I agree, I think the wording of 1 makes that confusing, because I think the goal is to regulate subdivisions. So you're talking about the site plan and any necessary special use permit relevant to the subdivision. Because everything A through G, little a through little g, is relevant to subdivision. And a subdivision has to have a site plan and may need a special use permit, but not necessarily.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, but the main application is for the subdivision. It's the subdivision
That's what I'm saying.
application that drives the process.
Yes,
And the other stuff just sort of comes along.
Yes.
You need them, right?
right. And I think that's the intent of 1. I just don't think it's worded that way.
Oh, okay, if that's the intent, then it's confusing, the
Yes.
way it's written. So we'll need to go back and,
Well, but let's get back
So
to
for
the
the-
topic at
Figure
hand.
that
So
out,
for the
yes.
definition, how about
agreed, I agree.
the original parcel of land in contemplation of a subdivision?
That sounds,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
that
Good.
sounds right.
Took the long way around to get there.
Okay. You're keeping a running list, Jeff, so add that to your list of things we need to
Yes. Thanks.
go back and look at.
I like the definition of park.
Okay, move on.
Okay.
I guess we could live with that one.
We're adding most recent.
What do you mean most recent?
Oh, and parent parcel, but it doesn't say effective date of this chapter. It
I
says-
took it out. I just
Yes.
said the original parcel of land intended for subdivision.
Yeah.
Because if that's what the definition is supposed to be referring to, then use the KISS principle.
Parking lot. Oh, this, I can't imagine this occurs in the code.
Parking lot, an accessory structure on a lot on which patrons are allowed to park or store vehicles, which can include a structure for collecting money or handling tickets. A parking lot includes a public garage.
I feel like it should say parking garage, not parking lot, but that's beside the point.
And then we have parking space. You know, I've mentioned this before, but, you know, when there was an issue up on Silver Lake
Oh,
with
yeah.
the,
Yep.
you know, Dutchess County Federation of
Yep.
Fishing, Hunting, whatever.
Right.
And people
Right.
were parking their cars on the thing, and they were trying to say it was a parking lot,
Right.
but the space really only provided for like 3 cars, and the driveway across the street had maybe parking for 6 cars. It was like, you know, how do you define it?
Well, I think part of the issue there, which I think Neil tried to address, is that there was no structure.
Mm-hmm.
There was just a lot.
It was just vacant
Right.
land, really.
Yeah,
It
okay.
wasn't even paved or anything, so.
Oh, I thought it was paved.
No.
Okay. But here he's saying he added accessory structure. An accessory structure on a lot. So that means that you couldn't do that anymore because the parking is the principal use. Because there's nothing else on that piece of ground, right? So by putting accessory structure, doesn't that remove that issue from the equation?
Why? Because my question is that a parking lot on which patrons are allowed to park, how does that differ from a driveway? That's always been my problem with
Well-
what the issue was up in Silver Lake there.
I guess it would mean that if you had a building on the lot that, say, was your office or even if.
No, there was no building on that lot.
That's what I mean. So by putting accessory structure in there, you've eliminated that problem because there's no principal structure.
But why
You can't
does,
have an accessory use without a principal. But if you, say, had a lot with a house, that was your principal.
Well,
And then you could have parking for people.
Yeah, the only use of that lot was to get onto the lake.
Right, no, I understand that.
And I think
Right,
the big
right.
objection was that they were allowing anybody to use it.
Well, yeah, right, okay.
but getting back to the, so
Anyway,
parking
okay.
space to your point, defines what a parking space is, but then parking lot makes no reference to parking space. So what's the point? Like a parking lot is a group of parking spaces. It doesn't even say parking space in it. And that, if you're talking about that you could call anything a parking lot, whether it's a driveway, that's true, I think, when you read that.
I mean, the only thing that we have, anything that's really close to a parking lot would be our parks. Or possibly Omega.
Right, but is that an accessory structure? That's just a,
No, it's just a place
It's
to
actually
park a car.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, a garage, you could consider that to be an accessory structure because that's a building.
right.
A parking lot is not a building.
Right, and in the definition of structure, It's a static construction or assembly or materials, the use or occupancy of which requires a fixed location on the ground or attachment to an object having such a fixed location.
You could refer
Structures
to
shall
as-
include but are not limited to buildings, stalls, booths, sheds, storage bins, swimming pools, tennis courts, gasoline pumps, billboards, and mobile homes. So if a tennis court is a structure, then the implication is that a parking lot is a
You
structure.
refer to it as an accessory use.
Well, that's regulation, not definition.
Can-
So in 25063, where it regulates off-street parking and loading, I'm looking for it, but it does say in there that it has to, it can't be the principal use of a property.
Okay,
Can,
so that would solve that problem.
is parking lot used anywhere?
Yeah,
You
it's
got stewards, you got,
No, is it in the,
250-63. Yeah,
It's a
the title is
permitted use,
off-street
so
parking and
sure it
loading.
and it says parking lot?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard your question.
Yeah, I want to know.
don't know, that's a good
Why are we
question.
defining parking lot if
Right,
it's not
yeah, I'll check,
used?
I'll
Okay,
check.
thank you.
It's interesting, a parking lot accessory structure, but if you go over and look at the definition of structure, it is a static construction or assembly of materials, the use of occupancy which requires a fixed location on the ground or attachment to an object having such a fixed location. Shall include, but not limited to, buildings, stalls, booths, sheds, storage bins, swimming pools, tennis courts, gasoline pumps, billboards, mobile dwellings. There's no accessory structure. Take out an accessory structure and just put parking lot, a lot on which patrons are allowed to park. I mean, that in blue should be deleted in my estimation. It's not a structure. It's an area. Or a lot. If you had parking structure, that would be like a parking garage, maybe multi-levels, maybe one level. But I don't see a parking lot as having any structure at all required to have a parking lot. You have no structure at either one of the rec parks. It's just an area to park cars.
Right. And parking spaces all over that section, but.
Yeah,
Fine.
in 25063, it never mentions parking lot. It only uses the word lot in reference to the parcel, the lot itself. And Russ, to your point, I think that the way the definition is worded is confusing because it makes it sound like you're going to park in a building. The definition of structure includes tennis court as a structure because it is anchored to the ground. But my issue with that is we would prefer gravel parking lots to paved parking lots in most cases, right? And so a gravel parking lot is graded, but can that really be considered a structure? And I don't think so, right?
What if we reinstate the original definition,
well, Russ is saying take out accessory
Yeah.
structure.
which basically
And-
goes
and
back to where it
just-
was before?
Why do we have it at all?
Well, parking lots are a permitted use in the town, so I think we ought to define it in some fashion.
Okay, so they're not, it's not in the
Well,
code. If it's
yeah.
a permitted
Oh,
use,
yeah,
then
no,
that's
it is
fine.
definitely, it is a
Yeah,
permitted use.
parking,
Then that's-
parking lot is in the schedule of use?
What's that?
Parking lot is in the schedule of use?
Well, it's in this one. I don't know if it's in the new one, but it's in the existing one,
Under,
parking lot.
as an accessory use?
I'll tell you in a minute.
As a commercial accessory use, probably.
Probably commercial, I would think, but let me double check here. Parking lot is under business and commercial uses. And it is allowed in
Hamlet?
CR1, RH, Hamlet, industrial, and floodplain.
But it's under commercial and business uses, not
Business and commercial uses.
not
yes.
accessory? That's odd, because I believe,
With the site plan, it is allowed, so it is allowed, we should
Yeah.
define it. It is allowed.
right, yeah, it doesn't appear in 25063, and I have to keep looking for it, but I believe it says that essentially a property cannot be just a parking lot. But if the schedule of use shows it as a business or commercial use principal, not accessory, then there's a discrepancy there.
Right.
Well, I think that may be why Neil added accessory, although he said accessory structure, which is not
Right.
right. I mean, you could say an accessory use, if we wanted it to be an accessory use, except that means there has to be another building on the lot, which sort of defeats the purpose of having a parking lot.
So, yeah, I just found it's 250, 63C3, required parking and loading spaces shall be provided upon the same lot as the use or structure to which they are accessory, except that off-street parking spaces required for structures or land uses on 2 or more adjacent lots may be provided in a single common facility. So this it says that the parking lot is an accessory use.
Right, it's that,
Well, but that's not parking lot, though, is it?
Well, the parking lot is never referred to in 25063,
Yeah.
ever. It is only refers to parking spaces, loading spaces, off-street parking. It never uses the phrase parking lot.
This sounds like it could simply refer to a dwelling, a house. And talking about parking and loading spaces shall be provided on the same lot as the use or structure to which they are accessory. So if you have a house and you have a parking area, that's what this says to me, as opposed to a commercial parking lot, which is to me, sounds like a very different thing.
I think this covers the commercial parking lot too. It doesn't, it says,
The definition?
that's
Or
what you're looking
63.
at, C3. C3, you know,
So,
I'm sorry?
I don't see it, but okay, if you
Well,
think it does.
C3 would mean that a commercial parking lot as a principal use is not allowed. But if in the schedule of use, it's listed as a principal business or commercial use, then that's a discrepancy.
Yeah, it's got parking lot under the new
It's there, it is still there, yeah, it's still there.
site plan required, yes.
Yep, site plan required.
In CR1, RH, H, I, and F.
Okay.
Schedule of uses.
Okay, so it needs to be defined, but it needs to be an accessory use on a lot on which patrons are allowed to park or store vehicles, yada, 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 right?
Except that's where you run into problems. Let's say you want to have a parking lot.
Yeah,
Okay, you have it, you put down gravel, whatever, you have it on. Okay. If the parking lot is accessory use, you need to have a principal use on that lot. What would that be? You can't have an accessory use without a principal use.
I understand.
Okay,
but-
so what do you do then to make it legal?
Well, explain to me, give me why would you have a parking lot that you didn't have a primary that wouldn't be an accessory use? Like,
Just a piece of ground.
A commercial parking lot, like, if somebody bought a piece of property next to the park and decided they wanted to charge people to park there.
Yeah.
And that was the
okay, or
only use
any
of that
open-
land.
Or the lot over there. Any open lot. You buy an open lot, you put down some gravel, you open a parking lot.
okay, well, accessory structure
According to this, you
doesn't.
can't do that.
Right, okay, I understand.
Right.
But accessory structure doesn't work either.
No,
No.
correct.
Exactly. Neither one of them works.
So do we just change it to a lot on which patrons?
Well, you could, what's,
Are allowed to
yeah.
park.
Yeah, basically. Just go back to the way it was before.
All right, great.
Yeah. Because it says there, a parking lot, actually, how about if you say can include rather than includes? What do you think? A parking lot can include a public garage?
Is a public garage allowed anywhere?
It's not in the schedule of uses, but according to this definition, I guess it would be allowed. I didn't see public garage in here. All I see is parking lot.
So how about this?
No, public garage is not listed here.
An area,
Garage is a parking lot.
So it is allowed.
No, you said a public garage is a what?
Garage, so definition of public garage says, the rental storage space for more than 2 passenger cars or one commercial vehicle not owned by a person residing on premises shall be deemed a parking lot.
Where are you finding that?
It's the definition, garage public.
Oh, garage public, not public garage? All right.
but in the schedule of use, garage public is not allowed.
It's not listed.
It's not listed.
Yeah, so, but if we say in the definition that a parking lot can include, then presumably that would make it allowed, right? Even though it's not listed in the schedule of uses.
Correct. So in terms of the definition of parking lot, if we say an area of a lot in which patrons are allowed to park or store vehicles as an accessory use, which can include a structure for collecting money or handling tickets.
No, but
But then you
you
still have
don't want
this,
accessory use in there.
you still have this accessory problem.
No, the problem is with an accessory structure. The
No.
parking lot has to be an accessory use based on 250-63.
But doesn't there have to be a primary use to have an accessory use?
Yes, but that doesn't have to be in the definition, because it's in the definition of accessory use.
Oh. Here's what Kat was referring to, under garage, public. A garage or covered parking lot conducted as a business. Rental of storage space for more than 2 passenger cars or 1 commercial vehicle not owned by a person residing on a premises shall be deemed a parking lot. See also parking lot.
And the last sentence of the parking lot definition says a parking lot includes a public garage.
Well, we changed that. So
Or can include a public garage.
we changed that from our
What's
meetings
that?
in the past.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we changed garage public to private garage.
To private garage?
Yep.
Because private garage is here, they're separate.
Oh, wait a second here.
There are 2 separate definitions here. There's private and there's public.
Then I'm missing something here.
A private garage is
Yeah.
yours, is your own garage, as opposed to a public garage, which is one that you would rent out, or you rent out
This is
space.
Garage private or garage public, see private garage or public garage.
Okay,
And then under private garage, I have a definition. I don't think I saw one for public, oh, public garage, yeah. So,
Right.
under public garage, it says a garage covered or uncovered parking lot conducted as a business,
Right.
the rental of storage space for more than 2 passenger cars or 1 commercial vehicle not owned by a person residing on the lot shall be deemed a parking lot.
right.
Also see parking lot.
Right.
Right.
So
And
public
this
gar-
doesn't say anything about being an accessory use or principal use. So then I would refer then to 250-63, which regulates off-street parking to determine the regulations that apply with this definition. And those regulations say that it has to be accessory to a use.
In which case, so then we can say an accessory, we can use accessory in the definition.
Accessory use. We want to make sure we say the
Right,
word
not
use,
structure.
right?
Right.
Right. So then, again, it would be an area of a lot in which patrons are allowed to park or store vehicles as an accessory use, which can include a structure for collecting money or handling tickets. As an accessory use, comma, which can include.
You saying that as for the definition, or you're saying that's what we should change?
For the definition of parking lot.
Should be for parking lot.
So say that again,
Yep,
area on a
an-
lot?
An area of a lot in which patrons are allowed to park or store vehicles as an accessory use, comma, which can include a structure for collecting money or handling tickets.
And we're gonna keep it, the parking lot includes a public garage.
I think we have to,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fine.
yeah.
I'm clear.
And then parking space?
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Particulate matter?
The business with parking space, though, if it's only, it specifies 1 passenger vehicle. But what about people who have trailers and such things as that? Or even trucks, you know?
Is that, oh,
What do we
see,
do with-
I read it as more
Saying
thinking
exclusive
about
of
the,
driveways.
the size, not the, not what you're allowed to
Oh.
put there.
Oh, I see what you're,
I'm not
okay.
sure I'm right, but that's the way I read it.
Okay, yeah, okay. So that's the minimum size, is size for parking 1 passenger vehicle, which means if it was a trailer, it would be bigger, is what you're saying? Okay,
Well, no, I'm just saying, that's the way I read it, but it also refers to 250-63, so where does it say? Oh, each parking space shall be at least 9 feet wide and 18 feet long if unenclosed, and at least 10 feet wide and 18 feet long if bordered by walls or columns on 2 or more sides.
It also says in the definition, Elliot, is no less than the minimum size. So it could be bigger.
Yeah, but Elliot's wondering, what he's, we're talking about, I'm just interpreting it differently. It says for the parking of one passenger vehicle, but what if you wanted to park something else there? Why is it space being specific?
I see.
And
You
it
could
does,
simply-
I'm not right, because it defines the size in the zone, in the code, so
Right.
that's not.
But you could simply eliminate the word passenger for the parking of one vehicle.
Well, that
Or
would,
you could just eliminate after it says specified in 25063.
Of this
You could do-
chapter.
Yes,
yeah, you could just take out that whole phrase.
sure.
All right.
Particulate matter,
That's fine,
performance standards,
fine.
zebra.
We're not there yet. We
I don't
wish
know,
we
but
were.
We got 6 minutes left. so. Permanent use, person,
I think they're fine.
personal service. Personal service business.
Yeah, that's, it's,
So for permitted use, I had said change to for which lots or structures may be used.
oh, he doesn't like, because it says land, lots, buildings, or structures. He doesn't like it when that, because it's redundant in his opinion. But we have buildings and structures in lots of places, but we could take out land. Because it is, I mean, I do understand his point.
The principal difference between building and structures being that a building has, part of the definition is that it has walls. A structure doesn't have to have walls. A tennis court is a structure. Again, so it is important to have
Or
both.
sign.
Yeah, but in terms of land and lots, I don't see the reason for both. Yeah.
Okay.
So just take out land or change what I am saying?
Just take out land.
You lost me, where are you?
In permitted use,
Permanent use?
permitted,
Top of page 40, Russell.
no, well, we did, but then we went back.
Okay.
And we're just taking out the word land, because land and lots refer to the same thing.
Wonderful.
Okay? All right. Personal service is repetitive. I think it's just a typo. Not including. It says motor vehicle sales and service use twice.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if we have to, if we can't just stop after
Why do
adult
we need
business
to
use.
include all that stuff about motor vehicles
Yeah,
there?
I mean, then we should include every other use too. But
Exactly.
It says providing services involving the care of a person or a person's apparel.
Right,
So obviously cars would not be included.
right.
But I do think it's important to include adult business use because that would relate to a person.
So what would you say, but not including an adult business use period? Is that what
Yes.
you would say?
Yes,
And stop it there? And leave out all the stuff about motor vehicles?
correct.
All right.
So let me just catch up here.
Okay. An establishment primarily engaged in providing services involving the care of a person or person's apparel, including but not limited to, blah, 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 but not including an adult business use, period.
Okay.
And leave out all the other stuff about motor vehicles. And In the third line above that, Dean,
Yep.
it should say parlors with an S, tattoo parlors. Because all the rest of them are plural in that list.
Mhm.
Is that what you're suggesting, Jeff?
Yeah, and then potentially change from, but not including an adult,
Right.
but not including any adult business
Right.
use, because we have multiple adult business uses defined.
Any-
I don't know why he singled out motor vehicles there. That's kind of a strange thing, but anyway.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left, so unless someone has an objection to religious workshop.
The only thing I wonder is if we need to include land. Is
Any
this
building or
restricted
land?
to be within a building? So any building or land together with accessory buildings and uses, and which building and land are maintained.
Would you say or and?
I think we have to say "and" because
And
it's not
land.
an "or," right?
Any building and land,
Yeah.
okay. And then also, the same thing in the second line,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, well, with that being said, we're only a minute left. So let's end for tonight, and we'll pick up from Pond. So I make a
Okay.
motion to end the business.
Second that?
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.